Welcome, friends, family, comrades, colleagues, and siblings and community in Idaho. We're super excited to share some space with you today. I am Chelsea Gaona Lincoln. I use she or they pronouns, and I am coming to you today from the ancestral and unceded territory of the Shoshone-Bannock, Shoshone-Paiute people, currently known as Caldwell, Idaho. I'm super happy to be sharing space with you today. My visual description: I am a Latinx woman with longer, curly, shoulder-length hair, and I am wearing some kind of see-through glasses and a yellow dress with a beige shawl situation is what's happening right now. And I will kick it on over to Jen for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, whatever time of day you might be watching this. My name is Jennifer Martinez. You can call me Jen. My pronouns are she, hers, and Aya, and I am also coming to you from the unceded territories of the Shoshone-Bannock and Shoshone-Paiute peoples, also known as Boise, Idaho. And what else about me? I am a Latinx woman, and I have short black hair that is currently kind of like pushed back, maybe 50 style. I have some big round gold frames that that go into a cat eye, and also have like bling rhinestones all along the bottom. And I have a shirt that is like full of flowers, just like flowers and vines and leaves, with some red lipstick. And I am going to go ahead and pass it to Michelle.
Hi, my name is Michelle Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I am on the unceded land of the Duwamish Coast Salish people. I am a white woman with a pink and orange flowered headscarf, a pink cardigan, and a pink watermelon t-shirt, also pink lipstick, and light green glasses. And I am so happy we're all here together today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's super great to have everybody in this space today. I wanted to start off by telling folks a little bit about how I actually came to be at Legal Voice. It was coincidental, really. I actually started off as a plaintiff for a case that Legal Voice is supporting and working on. I had a friend of mine in community give me a call and say that Legal Voice and some other shared folks were looking for a particular plaintiff. And at the time I was pregnant with my first child, who is now almost 3 years old. I can't believe I'm saying that. Almost 3. I was pregnant at the time. And they were talking to me about the fact that in Idaho, a person's health directive, a legally binding document, a health directive, would not potentially be honored if they just because they were pregnant. And me being me, I could not believe how outlandish and how degrading that was. And talked to my partner, was immediately intrigued, was introduced to Legal Voice's team, got to start working with them in the litigation process, and just felt so supported and so lifted and carried, and my voice amplified. They answered all of my questions about every component of the case you could think of from the beginning, especially for myself, not having any background in law whatsoever. Always felt like I could be in community with them. They invited myself and my family to their events, which are in Seattle at this point. And I was so happy just to continue building community with them as a plaintiff. And a couple years down the road, new mama, and certainly loving, the job that I had prior, a career that I was in for almost 16 years. Something came up through my email feed that they were looking for somebody here on the ground in Idaho. And having already been so invested and so impressed, and just so honored to already be working with Legal Voice, I checked out the requirements for the job of what they were looking for and felt like it spoke to me. I actually didn't know if they were actually going to be able to hire me, if that was going to be legal. Michelle, you probably remember there was probably lots of conversations about that at the office. But actually reached out to Kim and said, hey, should I go for this? And Kim said, definitely go for this. So, anybody should apply that feels like they are feeling called to do so. So I did. Luckily, and I don't know what the back end looked like that. Michelle, you might have to know more than I do, but they talked to their own legal counsel to find out if I was even could be considered as a candidate. And I went through the interview process and was actually brought on to support litigation work that Legal Voice is doing, because there was other cases to come, which we'll talk on a little bit later. It escalated very quickly, actually. And that was kind of the idea of what I was going to be here for litigation support. But what changed is the needs of Idaho. And what's been amazing is how Legal Voice has listened. Legal Voice has listened to what the needs of the community happen to be on the ground in Idaho. And when I said, hey, we need spaciousness for organizing. Hey, we need spaciousness for lobbying. Oh my goodness, we need spaciousness for more community input and training to help them feel prepared going into some of these, what feel like a battle scene, going into legislative session. And Legal Voice said, okay, so my job has probably shifted 180 compared to what I was hired to do. So it went from litigation support coordinator to now the Idaho programs manager, and I could not be more thrilled. And it was different and strange. So while everybody else was getting settled into quarantine life and working remotely, I had already been doing so. But there was something really dynamic and special when Jen Martinez got hired. I was over the moon excited to have another on the ground person here in Idaho. So Jen, I'll let you tell everybody here at home kind of what you've been doing and what you're manifesting in your position with Legal Voice.
Totally. Thanks so much for the intro, Chelsea. And I always love hearing your story too, of just how there's so many ways to engage with the organization, right? So it's always good to hear that, you can be a plaintiff and, you could potentially work for the organization that is protecting your rights. So again, my name is Jen. My pronouns are she, hers, Aya. And I've been working at Legal Voice for 7-ish months or so now. So very new. I'm the communications and marketing manager, and it's been really interesting for me because this is the first job I've had that is completely remote. I haven't had an opportunity to meet other staff in person yet. So that's been also a lesson in patience and learning just how to meet people and make community over Zoom, which is so easy to do with the team that we have. Really, everyone is so gracious. And so what I do is I help kind of cultivate the voice of Legal Voice across different platforms. So across social media, on emails, on the website, any printed materials we have, any potential ads you might see at any point or hear, is kind of stuff that I help cultivate. And I always try to get as much input as possible because I know that I am one person and I want to make sure that the vision that we're giving people of the organization is in line with everyone's vision, right? I want to make sure that we're getting input from all of our attorneys and all of our staff because everyone works with such different communities. And I want to make sure we're not inadvertently excluding anyone or saying something that could be harmful to any communities. So that's something that I really take to heart is how do we make sure that the voice we have is really from the center, from folks who are most impacted. And additionally, something that I've been trying to implement as well is just having more accessibility for our events. So even though we are doing so many things through Zoom, we can have ASL interpreters, right? We should be closed captioning everything in general, even before and after the pandemic, like we should be doing that. I don't think I can watch movies at all anymore without closed captioning because it just helps me. And so there's so many different things that we can do. And I think one of the most challenging pieces for me, but also the most fulfilling pieces has been making sure that Idaho is getting talked about and getting covered as much as the work in Washington. Not to say that the work in Washington isn't important, but there's so many things that, Chelsea is really helping to lead and helping to cultivate on the ground in Idaho that folks really need to know about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why what happens in a state like Idaho is so important, not just regionally, but across the country as well. So we'll dive into that a little bit more, but that's been one of the most like I said, challenging, because I don't think I was expecting at any point to have to cover like 2 legislative sessions at the same time and 2 astronomically different states, right? Like Washington's pushing really cool stuff and Idaho's like, oh my gosh, how do we protect our rights? But it's also amazing, right? Because so much of what we have done is not just because of Legal Voice, it's because of the community that we have intentionally and carefully created and the partnerships that we are constantly working on to make better and to create more equity amongst all of our organizations here in Idaho. So that's a little bit about what I do and who I am. And I really want to give Michelle an opportunity to introduce herself as well, kind of the role that you have played at Legal Voice and the role you currently operate in.
Thank you. And I'm so glad we're doing work in Idaho. We had talked about it for a long time. And so it's awesome that we have staff on the ground doing this amazing work and working with these amazing communities that have always been there. And it was a matter of just prioritizing time and money to make sure that, we were showing up in these communities and in these spaces. My name's Michelle Johnson, like I mentioned earlier. I was with Legal Voice as their development director for 10 years. And I left to grow and do different things and, change it up a little bit, but I couldn't stay away. So I came back. I'm back in a consultancy position to help move some things forward until we hire a new development person. Our last one had to resign. So here we are. And I'm actually, if I can go ahead, can I just dive into a little bit to the history of Legal Voice? So Legal Voice started with a lawsuit in 1978. A group of young female athletes were suing Washington State University, or they wanted to, for inequities in the sporting arena. Washington State had just built this huge brand new stadium for athletics, and the men were allowed to use it. And the women, meanwhile, were still relegated to the high school across the street. So state money and alumni dollars had built this beautiful facility, and yet women weren't allowed to use it. But nobody wanted to take on Washington State. Like, everybody was afraid to sue Washington State. So this group of really dynamic athletes got together and they, crossed over the mountains to Western Washington and said, look, we want somebody to help us sue Washington State for inequities. And a group of female lawyers from the ACLU of Washington at the time said, we'll take this on, yes, civil rights is important, but gender inequity is rampant. So let's take this on. And they did. And they won, believe it or not. And thus, out of this lawsuit came what at the time was called Northwest Women's Law Center and has since become Legal Voice. So that was the very beginning, was an equity issue in athletics, and it has become so many different things.
I always love hearing the history of Legal Voice and how it got started, and just the feminism behind it, and just, everything we continue to work towards. And similarly to how we just had one case in Idaho when I came on, it was just started with one case and things really escalated quickly, I feel like. We were founded on the principle that the law is one of the most powerful tools in our society and that we are obligated to use it for good. And throughout 4 decades of work, there's been so much focus on advancing legal rights of women, girls, the LGBTQ community, challenging systems of sexism and oppression. And Legal Voice has really developed a reputation for perseverance, success, and cutting edge work that makes us a leader in our region.
Definitely. And it's important to note that so much of the work has happened in Washington State, but also regionally, right? There's been so many collaborations with other organizations across the Northwest in general. And one example that I kind of want to lift up about Legal Voice is in 1997, Legal Voice struck down Montana's deviant sexual conduct law, which was criminalizing intimate sexual relationships between consenting adults of the same sex. And this case was Griscan versus Montana. And I'm so sorry if I'm saying that name incorrectly as well. So the Supreme Court eventually would use this case as part of their reasoning in striking down Lawrence v. Texas, which overturned the criminalization of same-sex relationships overall. So like there was groundbreaking litigation happening in Montana, right, which helped set the course for the country, which is why we say like it's important that we do work in every single state, especially here in the Northwest. Additionally, in 2004, Legal Voice worked to persuade the Montana Supreme Court to rely on Legal Voice's reasoning in holding that the University of Montana's refusal to recognize domestic partnerships was unconstitutional. And if you want to read up a little bit more, if you're kind of like a law nerd and want to do some more digging, you're more than welcome to. The case is Snetzinger versus Montana University System as well. So there's been other work that we've done across the region, and we're going to continue expanding. We're going to continue doing this work, but we just wanted to elevate some examples of stuff that we've done over the course of Legal Voice's organizational history.
Right. And taking what Jen is saying a step further, some of our work has actually made it to the US Supreme Court. And we have also written multiple, sorry, let me restate that. We have written multiple amicus briefs to support our allies and the interpretation of laws that advance women and LGBTQ rights. So it's fair to say that our work has had an impact even on a national level.
I love that so much. And all of that being said, growth is constant, but that also includes ours, full stop. And to that end, we've learned that with the pursuit of justice, we have unintentionally left out people and entire communities behind that should have been at the table all along. And even though it was unintentional, the harm that has been produced is very real and has been unavoidable. And Legal Voice has worked really hard to acknowledge that the legal system is deeply rooted in racism and white supremacy, and that these values persist and continue to perpetuate inequities today. We recognize too that we're not always aware how power-owned privileges, racial identities, and positions of power affect and impact the work that we do and our engagement with Black communities, Indigenous communities, and other communities of color, not only as individual staff, but also as an organization. And oftentimes it's been transactional.
We're really working hard to change this and to center the voices of impacted communities and to center lived experience from folks who, you know, so many times the solutions to issues are within community, right? And we just need to be able to offer space at the table or create a whole new table if we need to, so that everyone has a voice. And we've really begun the work of investing in authentic partnerships and community building, not just the transactional relationships that Chelsea was touching on, but how do we work symbiotically with organizations in the regions that we're working in. We're actively working to dismantle our own internal racism and how it has impacted or may be impacting how we view problems that are arising, and also how we approach solutions. We're really energized by the journey that we're undertaking. And we're so excited to bring, all of you, our Legal Voice supporters, our volunteers, our advocates, and our friends along with us in this powerful transformation that we're going through and that we're going to continue to go through.
I love all of that. And it's not always easy, and it's not glamorous, and it's not always sexy work, but it's necessary work, and we're so committed to it. And it's exciting to see that trajectory take place. Some of the questions that people sometimes have is, what are we working on in Idaho after traditionally being in Washington and Oregon? We have to do the work here in Idaho because rights don't end at the borders through laws, even though those borders do exist. And we want to be part of building a stronger Northwest, not just for Washington, but for the region, because we know that there's families that move back and forth across that. And we certainly want it to spread across the country. And if we can do our part in the region, then we certainly will. And there are so many great organizations and communities doing wonderful work. And if we can lend our expertise, if and when, we certainly will and certainly do. We started out, like I said earlier, hiring me as the first remote hire as litigation support, and it's really evolved into a community organizing and lobbying position. And even to that end, I think it's more of a community listening position. My job really feels like it's my job to have my ear on the ground and to find out what the community wants, what they need, and what needs to be amplified, and where Legal Voice can leverage their expertise to give that kind of support and to give that kind of platform where it's not happening already. So what happens in Idaho really does impact every single one of us, no matter where you're listening from or watching from today. And you'll get to hear a little bit more about the Hickox case in a minute. But a perfect example of why we have to do more to support the community on the ground and what's already happening in Idaho. Idaho was the first state to pass an anti-trans athlete bill in 2020. And now this year we saw lawmakers in 33 states pass similar bills. Idaho is setting trends that we're not interested in being known for. The work of stopping hate-riddled legislation is so much bigger than one state. People across the country have their eyes fixed on Idaho. We are part of a national conversation. If we can stop bills from being tested in states like Idaho, we're not only going to reduce the harm that's done to people in the gem state here at home, but we can reduce the harm that's being done across the country. And when I think about that, I think about how that is legitimately going to save the lives of trans kids all over when I think about HB 500 especially. And I know that there is a video that people can check out if they want to see more about that. But there's just so many wonderful things that we're working on here in Idaho. And that's one of the reasons it's really important that we're able to continue doing this work.
Totally. And I'm just gonna, that was like the perfect segue into talking more specifics about what are we doing, right? Like, we're not just gonna tell you like, this is what we wanna do. We wanna let you know like what we're actively doing or what we actively have been doing for a number of years now. So Chelsea was talking about the Hickox v. Idaho case around House Bill 500, which is that anti-trans athlete bill that was passed. That is a case that we are waiting for something to come from the judge within the next few months. You know, we just had oral arguments on that case on May 3rd, I believe was the date. And that's something that we're doing in collaboration with the ACLU of Idaho and also with the ACLU National Organization, right? We do this stuff in partnership and in community. And that is just something that is so, it's such a pivotal piece of, it's a pivotal litigation case, right? We have to really understand that the reason we saw 33 states attempt to pass this is because it was successful in Idaho, right? They are learning from what works and what doesn't work and tweaking what they need to tweak to be able to pass it in their own state legislatures. And we just can't condone that. And not only that, if we're doing work that actually centers those who are most oppressed and who experience the most harm from the systems that exist in this country, we cannot ignore states like Idaho, because we have so many folks who experience so much harm, who exist in so many intersections here. And we can't ignore folks just because the state's difficult to work in or because it's difficult to pass something. If anything, that's all the more reason for us to really dig our heels in and to really come together to figure out how we can stop harm like this from happening. And so that's one example that we've been actively working on for, gosh, it's been 1.5 years already, and just really anxious and hoping that we're hearing good news here in a few months that will be good news, not just for Idaho, but it will impact what's happening across these other states as well that have signed these bills into law.
Yeah, so much of everything you're saying, Jen, is resonating. I can't stop nodding my head. I almost had my fingers snapping there for a second. I think it's so true when you're talking about really centering the work here in Idaho because of the testing ground that we've become for things that are so heinous and harmful, and really set a horrible precedent for how people are treated. One of the other cases that we are involved in right now is America versus Idaho. And, you know, a federal court recently held that Idaho's law cannot require people capable of pregnancy to include language that voids their living wills, also known as an advance health directive. And that's how I came into Legal Voices community. I'm a plaintiff for this case. And the ruling was a very welcomed confirmation that pregnant people's right to direct their own medical care should be respected and should be honored. And I was going to read a quote and share it with you. It says, "Forcing life support on an unwilling pregnant person," and this part's in quotes, "violates the constitutional right of a competent person to refuse unwanted life-saving medical treatment. And that was from U.S. District Court Judge Beland Windmill in his ruling. And the judge noted that the pregnancy exclusion violates both the First Amendment as compelled speech and the 14th Amendment on due process to make healthcare decisions, emphasizing that women do not lose these rights because they are pregnant when they fall into a coma. And that we were very excited about that ruling, really just holding space for everyone that on the team that made that happen. Certainly not just myself, but there were 4 women total that were plaintiffs in that case. And as far as we know right now, there may be actually an appeal being filed. So they actually may be, Idaho may be fighting that ruling. So we'll keep you up to date, but that certainly just lends to more as to why the work we're doing here is so important. And certainly the examples that Jen gave, the ripple effect across the country with things that are tested here certainly lend itself to that. Another big component of the work that we are doing and that I would like to say we were done doing, but technically speaking, the legislature has not fully said sign die yet. The House is technically on recess and it is, let's see, May. But we were really busy during legislative session. I honestly don't know how Jen was juggling so much. I don't even know how you do it, Jen. I don't think you're sleeping enough. But juggling 2 legislative sessions and certainly doing lots of handholding and support for us here on the ground in Idaho. Also a huge shout out to Nisha, who isn't here with us today, but did monumental work for holding space for community and making sure that people were getting the information they needed to go into this really awful legislative session. But we were able to come together and start helping hold space for a reproductive justice coalition, which we're really excited to be in community with so many other organizations and partners that want to center destigmatizing reproductive justice and health and bodily autonomy. We're super just pleased with the progress of that and the way we came together. We really tried to focus on the intersectionality between the issues and the communities. So even though historically people think of us as a feminist organization that's focused on the progress and protection of women's rights and LGBTQ rights, we also really showed up when that came into matters of education, when it came into matters of racism, when it came into matters of just people's freedom of speech, just a whole host of issues that ran the gamut of attacking people's rights, because somewhere in there, there's an intersection. And we really tried to amplify that and making sure that people know it's okay to show up for each other. And we're going to get a lot more done if we're all focused on the collective liberation, not just one specific silo. And I really just love the partners that we got to work with in breaking down those silos. Those partnerships were across communities and across movements. And I cannot tell you how good it was to, although we were navigating such a toxic space, to be held so tightly by community, to be able to take a breath, to be able to lift each other up, to laugh through things and cry through things and swear through things collectively. We needed that joy to get us through a really horrible legislative session. And you can absolutely check out more on the legislative wrap-up video for some of the bills that we worked on specifically. That some of that work does definitely come with a content warning because there was a victim of sexual violence. So I want to preface that if you do decide to watch the video, please note that there will be another content warning before you get to that segment of the video.
Thanks so much for that, Chelsea. And I think it's so important to highlight that I think the organizing space in Idaho is entering like the next phase of growth where it has traditionally kind of been difficult sometimes to collaborate. I think the majority of social justice oriented organizations have realized the power of collective work. And so I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. And we're just really excited to have been a part of that, initial testing ground for figuring out how to do this in a way that honors all of our organizations, right? Because we all have our own missions and our own vision and everything. And like the community is still at the center of it all for all of us. So I think that was really cool to see. So, I mean, this is going to come with every call. There's always calls to action. And so whether you're watching this on a YouTube channel or you're watching this on our website, There will be links below the video with calls to action. And I'll just explain them to you here, and really look forward to seeing you show up for our events, or just, you know, if you want to volunteer, whatever it is. But you can sign up to receive our emails. You know, we send emails out during the legislative session for action alerts. We send emails to let you know about events, which we're still in the middle of this COVID-19 thing, but we're experimenting a little bit more with potentially outdoor parties, especially in Idaho, because like the summers are really, really nice here, and we want to take as much advantage of being out in the sun as possible, especially if you're like me and you've never worked from home. The last 14 months have been really hard. So we need to, you know, create community however we can, with safety precautions in place. So sign up to receive our emails. We'll have the link available for that. If you're not following us on social media, you should. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we do have a TikTok account. We just haven't started creating content for it yet, because this elder millennial is practicing on my personal account so that I can do things for the Legal Voice TikTok account. So
I love TikTok. I love it so much. I can't wait till we're up
I
on
can't wait till we
TikTok.
have the dances.
I know. I can't wait. I love it. I love it.
dancing and education, like what more do you want? Like we're gonna be
It's
rocking
everything
it.
I need. Everything
Yes. And then so we'll have links for all of that as well. And we also invite you to host a little shindig if you want. If you have a backyard that you know is just missing people, or if you want to go to a park somewhere or a patio, we would love for you to host a Get to Know Legal Voice party here in Idaho, just so that folks start to get to know us and we can start to build those relationships. You know, we can come in and say, like, we want to do these things. This is what we do. This is what we're about. But it takes time for those relationships to build. And we know that. And we want to go where you are. We want to go, you know, where you're inviting us to go, and just start to meet the folks and start to build that relationship between you and your network and Legal Voice. So there's a link to sign up if you are interested in basically being like a party host for us, and we can support you and handhold you through that as well, so that you're not dealing with any of that on your own. And I think those are all of the links I have right now. I don't know if Michelle, you want to throw anything else in there, or Chelsea?
Yeah. So if folks wanted to get a hold of either of you, will your emails be available? Should they, or the info email, in case they decide that they want to learn more, or have a coalition partner, potential partnership, or something that we could be doing together in the future? Of course, I don't want to promise anything because we are still a small staff in Idaho, but I know there's so much enthusiasm and so many great communities that, you know, we might not even have on our radar, so to speak, right? That we would love to learn more about as well.
Totally. Yeah. Chelsea, if you're down, we're can
I'm
definitely
super down. Please
Perfect.
I mean, I've had the same number since 2000. So if everybody doesn't have in Idaho doesn't have my number by now, pretty sure you can just Google it. But yes, I'm super down to have people have access to my email address if they feel like a personal connection would be easier than a link initially for the form. But, you know, invite us up. Like, I haven't peopled in so long. Let's fill up my Subaru and go do some things and spread the good word of Legal Voice and, you know, equity and liberation. And let's have some fun and share some laughs and some jokes at, you know, the long legislative session's expense. And we would love to be in community with people, especially in person, and introduce you to the amazing work that we're doing. I never knew an organization like Legal Voice existed. And I'm super grateful that I found my family here, my working family here, and I cannot wait to introduce all of you to them.
Yes, I love it. All right. Well, you heard it, folks. We're going to have our contact information wherever you're watching this from. The contact information should be on there by now as well. So please feel free to reach out to us. You can also find us individually on social media because we're pretty active on there. So you can always, you know, slide into our DMs only for advocacy and information on Legal Voice. But we're more than happy to answer any questions you might have. But I think that's all for now. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this, to get to know us more. Feel free to forward this to your network as well. And we look forward to getting to know you more this summer.
Definitely. Take care, everyone. Stay hydrated.
Bye.
Bye.